we're going to start with the very beginning of what you've done now that your blocks are finished. Step 1. We need to make sure that they're all the same size and learn the trick of how to make them work if they're not the same size. So this is a 12.5-inch ruler. It does exactly the size that we were hoping all of our blocks are. If it doesn't match exactly, we're okay. We can fix it. It just means that we're going to have to jimmy things around a little bit and kind of cheat. And that's okay. That's perfectly all right. So here's one of the blocks. This one was the Truman Block. If I set my ruler on it and we put it on the corners, I am really close. There's a little bit of difference here. And that's about it. This is what we're hoping that we've got. Just minor little things. So this one still can easily do that 1/4-inch seam when we put our sashing on it to make everything come together. And we can just mark it a little bit with a pin so that we know that this is the corner that's a little bit short. Okay? The Ferris wheel and the hexagons and the dogwood, we're going to have a background piece that's a little bit bigger. So when we put this ruler on and center our applique, we're going to be able to get it exactly 12.5 by 12.5 because there's nothing that's distorting the fabric. We cut it big on purpose, if you remember back to those blocks. So that one worked too. Then we get to some, and in my case it's all the pieced ones. The airplane looks right when I put the ruler on it and I try and, oh my goodness. So this edge came right to 12.5, 12 7/8. This one is almost a whole 1/8 of an inch off. Here it's almost a 1/4 of an inch off. Over here you can see almost a 1/4 of an inch. Some of this can be hidden. Some of this, if I look at just the 1/4-inch mark on this ruler, my cutoff is inside the seam. So I'd be okay. Let's check this one. This one's right on the edge, so I'd be okay. But as you can tell, every one of these sides is a little bit off. So when I go to put on my sashing, I'm going to have to jimmy that just a little bit on every one of them. It's just a little bit off on everything. And that's what happened to me over and over again on my pieced blocks. Now a good quilter, like Leslie, would take it apart and do it again. I am a lazy quilter. So if it's close enough, I'd probably be just fine. But if it's not close enough, try and balance this one. I'd probably count that one as close enough. Again, it's not right. I want everybody to be aware that they just don't come out right very often. This one, oh my, this is past. This one is not going to work because this one doesn't even come to 12 1/4. Can you see that? So here's the line and here's my fabric. There is not a way to jimmy around that. How do we fix it? This is what we're going to figure out. Two things we could do. This background fabric, because it goes everywhere, I could just add another strip. It's going to be right on the seam, and so it's not going to be the best way to do it. But we could do it that way. Or we take off this piece and make it a little bit wider, a 1/4 of an inch wider, and then it's going to be similar to all the rest. But if we really don't want to do that, because we're lazy, you cut your pieces of sashing. And this one's just a little bit lighter. I hope that this makes sense for you. But we're cutting our pieces of sashing. We want it to be decorative and helps to separate out the blocks so we can see each block as an individual picture that joins everything and makes it a wonderful picture. Leslie's quilt has the sashing. It makes everything come together. She said when she started with a white sashing, it didn't work at all. So this color is a wonderful choice. And this one could work for me. It probably won't be my final, but I want you to see how this works. So this is 2 inches. That makes my sashing 1.5 inches. It's a narrow sashing. It's not as small as it could be. You could go as small as a 1/2 inch finished if you wanted to, and it would just kind of frame everything. But this one's 2.5, this is 2 inches. So a final 1.5 inch. I'm going to have to jimmy things around. You can see that here. So on these 2 sides, which are pretty close, we're just going to flip it over and sew it on and make sure that it is this height. So take your rulers, measure this height, 12 1/8, cut this at 12 1/8, and make sure that it fits along here perfectly. And this side should be pretty close to that also, 12 1/8. Yeah, and so make sure that you cut them first. Measure your block, cut those off so you've got a nice center that makes everything come out smooth. Otherwise you get waves in your sashing. We don't want that. When you're finished with that and you've got the 2 pieces on, then we're going to measure again across. So we're just going to fake it here. We've got this, we've got this, and so we should come to about 15.5. So that means that I need a piece that's 15.5 to go across. But because of this problem, I can do the 15.5 up here, but on this side, my 15.5 has to be wider. So this is 2.5 inch blocks, strips, so that they will fit and bring the whole thing out. When you do this, you can't put anything in this center square. It's going to have to just be a plain sashing. But it does work, and it is a nice picture still. You'll still have a frame. You'll still see just a little bit of difference. If you look at the whole quilt, it's not exactly a straight line all the way across. It's another reason to use something that's close to what you've got. The sharper the contrast, the more it's going to show, but it is possible. If things are really wonky and you just can't make it work, or you don't want to have plain sashing like this turns out to be, there's another idea that you can use. And I'm using it on this one because I want to be able to show it to you. This is my first attempt at the bee. I liked it, but not for the quilt, so I am going to change it a little. What I'm going to do is take my I made a 4-inch border, a sash on all 4 sides. I'm turning it into a pillow. So what I'm going to do is go from this corner 1 inch past the corner of the quilt and draw a line. And we're going to do that on every corner. Corner of this, 1 inch past this corner, and draw a line. Now this one is probably a bigger sashing than I needed. But when I cut those out, this is going to be my block. In fact, let me do that. And you have to draw the line on this because your corners are going to disappear and you won't know exactly where your angle is. But this is a simple way to do this. This is a very wonky look. It's perfectly all right to be a little wonky, to have a little fun. And if you haven't checked our Pinterest page yet, this is the commercial. Go to the Pinterest page, we have a lot of these little handouts and pictures of things that we have done to help you, give you ideas on how to do this. This one is what we're trying to achieve, this wonkiness here. And you can see that it just gives a whimsical look to the quilt. If you don't like that, you're going to have to use a different method for fixing it. And I'm only using it here on my pillow because I think it will look great. But that's your commercial for Pinterest. Go to our Pinterest page and check out these handouts that we have for you. Ta-da! So that's going to be my pillow. And it'll be kind of whimsical. And when I do the pillow edge, it's always going to look just a little wonky. And that's okay. That's a great way, if your blocks truly are all different sizes, to help add a little fun and to give you a dimension that makes everything look like it was supposed to be that way. Nobody can tell from this layout that this block is 1/4 inch larger or 1/4 inch smaller than one of the other blocks, because it's completely different. And then you can run another piece of sashing like this picture to help bring everything together and into a square. So it's a cute idea, a cute way to do it. One of the things that you can do when you're making your sashing and it fits is called cornerstones. I like them. They're very pretty. Let me show you this wonderful quilt of Leslie's. It's an antique, so it's fragile, but you can see that they just did a simple white cornerstone in the corner of all of these blocks and embroidered it. And that made such a difference to the look of the quilt. I really think that if they hadn't had that, it would have been a nice quilt, but that really makes it stand out. It's a wonderful way to do things. And lots of quilt ideas can do that. So there's a thing called Quilt Layouts here that I have on the Pinterest page. You can see that they cut their sashing all the same size, and then they added fabric not just as a corner like this, but they also added the point for a star. Here you can see the friendship star duplicated over and over again. They just did a half triangle on each end of it. You have to make sure you're doing them all in the same direction in order to make sure that they actually make the star. But those are some of the fun things. Here they've got a 9-patch doing the cornerstone. This one is an example of an hourglass that can be done into those cornerstones. This one, very simple. Instead of putting in a cornerstone, they put in a whole block in between each of the pieced blocks. That gives a whole new look, and you can see a lot of examples of that on Pinterest. So take a look and see what kind of cornerstones people use in their quilts. I think that if you can follow those basic rules, jimmy it when you can, take smaller seams on your block if you have to, remake it if that's what makes it most usable, you're going to have a really nice product when you're finished. And you don't have to have been a perfectionist or to be an experienced quilter to be able to do these kinds of tricks. So have fun with your sashes, add cornerstones if you want, and we will see you on the next stage.